So yeah, I'm going to talk about internationalization, localization, however you want to call it. To me, it's the same thing. To me, it's a really important subject because I've done it personally on numerous occasions. I've lived in Mexico, I've lived in Guatemala, I've lived in Tanzania. I now live in Brazil. I've been there for 7 years. So in my mind, localizing a person, a business, anything is really important, but it has to be done the right way. You can't Google Translate your way through life. You have to be able to understand where you're going, who you're dealing with, the people that you live with in a new market, the people that you're working with in a new market. You can't fake it. You have to understand how things really are in that market. You can't just close your eyes, throw a dart at a map and say, oh, I'm going to expand to Russia, because the Russian market might be a lot different than the Brazilian market or the Mexican market, the Norwegian market. Everywhere has its nuances. While Google is essentially the same everywhere, it doesn't matter. Like you can't just trick Google and work your way up to page 1 in a new market without understanding who you're trying to reach and without delivering something to these people that they actually need. Why are they going to trust a Swedish SaaS product when Brazil already has the same SaaS product? What do you have that's different? How are you going to contact and reach these people in a way that's going to convince them that your solution is better for them? So how many of you have heard of Neil Patel? Show of hands. Okay, it's quite a few people. So I've been working with Neil for quite a few years. He's that smiley, happy fellow right here. I'm sure you've seen him all over the place. A few years ago when we first started talking, he mentioned to me that he was interested in the Brazilian market. He mentioned this to me not knowing that I already live in Brazil, that I'm fluent in Portuguese. So when he said this to me, my head went in the complete different direction from where our conversation was actually going. I started thinking about already leaving the company that I was working with to join Neil on his quest to dominate Brazil. That ended up happening. But he was already doing a lot of things. He was already, he'd already started Kissmetrics, Crazy Egg, Hello Bar. He's an investor, he's a consultant, he has all these things. I don't know how he does everything he does because, I talk to him every day. He's like the busiest dude I've ever met in my life. So when he said this, I was like, why? Like, why do you care about Brazil? Why do you care about the Spanish-speaking market, the German-speaking market? What is it like? What's the difference? You already get tons of traffic. You're already known around the world. You already have endless amounts of money. Like, why do you need more? And his idea is so much bigger than I could have even grasped at that time. And I still have trouble understanding because he's young. I'm older than Neil. He's 33. He's a young guy. He's been doing this for 17 years. Like, he is just so advanced when it comes to business and just being a crazy entrepreneur. And his idea is just to build something so big and so long term. He's not thinking about what's going to happen next week or next month or next year. He's thinking about what his brand is going to be in 30 years and what it's going to be worth then. And he understands that if you can be big in every market, you are worth so much, even if you're not making anything in those new markets. Like for the first year and a half, we didn't monetize anything in Brazil. And we've been in the Spanish-speaking and German-speaking market now for almost 3 years. We still haven't monetized, and it's not even in the plans. It's nothing, we don't even talk about it. It doesn't even come up in conversation. So his idea was just go into these places where there's less competition. It's not, how many of you are focusing on the English language even if you're not in an English-speaking country? How many of your sites are in English? Show of hands. Probably about half of the people in here. That's a lot. How saturated is Google in English? How many sites are you competing with? How hard is it to rank for search terms in the English language? How many competitors are doing digital and content and SEO well? You're competing against people from all over the world. I mean, we're sitting here in Sweden. Half those hands are probably from Sweden or from Denmark or Norway or England or all these different countries, and you're all competing for the same keywords in the same language. So, I mean, it's really difficult. So if you think about a new market, you'll find less saturation because even places like France or Italy, where the language isn't English, people are still fighting for those English keywords. And then if you think about population, there's just barely 10 million people in Sweden. In Brazil, there's 210 million. That's a huge difference. In the Spanish-speaking language, there's almost 500 million. That's a ton of people. And these are emerging markets, especially in the digital scene. Like these are not, it's not like Google English. You don't have the same kind of composition that you have. People are starting to learn, people are starting to understand what it means to rank, what it takes to rank, what kind of content needs to be produced to rank. And going into a new market, going into Mexico with the SaaS product from Norway, it might seem weird to somebody in Oslo until they do it and they see the traffic just skyrocket. You might have to make some pricing adjustments, but it doesn't matter. You're still growing a global brand. And obviously, we're in a global world. Like everything happens right on your phone. Like I'm spending a month right now in Europe because I'm not going to fly all the way from Brazil to Sweden to talk for 30 minutes and go back. I'm here for a month. But I can do everything from my phone, just like all of you. Like, you guys all have a phone. You all have a tiny office in your hand. So, you can do anything from anywhere. And when you do that, you create a brand that crosses borders. And that is also good for SEO. This isn't like on-page technical stuff that I'm talking about. I am not a technical person. Like, you guys are probably all more technical than me. Luckily, my team is full of amazing technical people, or else we'd be in trouble, because I don't understand the technical aspect. But when it comes to the bigger picture, when it comes to thinking globally and entering new markets, there's a lot of benefits from that can even help you at home. So just to give you an idea of what our traffic was like on neilpatel.com before Neil started thinking about globalization, he had almost 1 million visitors in 2015, which isn't bad. In 2016, I believe it was in April, was when we published the first article in Portuguese. And our traffic jumped from 800,000 in the year to 3.4 million users in the year. So if you look at around April, it was more around April, May, we started producing. You can start to see going up and going up. 2017 was a year of like crazy experiments. That's why you see a lot of weird spikes, and I'll get into some of that stuff later, but 2017 was a funny year. But the traffic again doubled. And then this year, we're only in October, and we're already at over 10 million. And you can see the growth is now just steadying up into the right. And this is just on one of our sites. This is just on neilpatel.com, the global. So this includes Portuguese, Spanish, and German, because we have different subfolders for each language. So, the traffic grows a lot because we're focusing on new markets. Just in Brazil alone, we're getting about 300,000 visitors per month, which is by far the largest personal marketing blog in all of Brazil. I think there's 2 other sites that are bigger than us in the marketing space, but they're giant companies. So they're companies that have been doing this for a while. There are companies that are now friends of ours and of Neil's. We go and visit them. We've known them for a while now. We've had like fun back and forth wars, like trying to take the #1 spot in Google for certain keywords. But the potential for this wouldn't have happened without thinking global and without going into these new markets. So this is just to give you a bigger idea of the past few years of how crazy this growth is. And I think I added a slide. Let me see. No, I didn't. So this is 87% organic from Google. We don't do any paid advertising to the Neil Patel blog. This is all organic or direct traffic and then some email traffic, but we're not really doing a lot of email marketing. This is Google. So you can't just translate content and say, hey, I'm going to do great in Mexico. Like, it doesn't work that way, because translating content is, like I said in the beginning, you need to understand the market. You need to understand what people need. You need to understand where there's gaps. What's missing in the new market? So obviously you need somebody on the ground. You need somebody who can help you understand what's going on. So the #2 article here is just a really popular blog post about Instagram, and that's the top article in all of his languages. People love their Instagram. But #4 is an article that we created specifically for Brazil. It doesn't exist on neilpatel.com in English. It doesn't exist in Spanish or German. It was a gap that we saw for a search term that had a lot of demand, and had really shitty options on page one, just to be honest. Like what was there wasn't good, and we decided to create something better. It ranked immediately. It's now number one for that keyword in Brazil, and it drives a huge amount of traffic to the Brazil site. So when you're localizing a blog or a site or whatever, you can't just translate. I mean, you can translate some of the content, but you need to optimize it for the local market. You need to understand local keywords. You need to have somebody on the ground that has experience in SEO to be able to tell you what's going to work, what's missing, what's ranking for keywords already, what those companies are doing, what those sites are doing that's working for them, what isn't working for them. You need to understand all this stuff. So, you know, if you're a company from Sweden and you don't know anybody in Brazil, or you don't have somebody there that can help you do it, don't go there. Because, just putting your blog into Google Translate and putting it live on your site is not going to get you anywhere. It's not going to get you traffic. The few people that might go to it are going to see that you faked it, that you used a tool. That's terrible for user experience. Google is all about user experience, so you're not going to do well. It needs to be done correctly. Oh, yeah, I did do a slide. I just put it reversed. So yeah, it's all organic, direct. The focus is always like that, because if you're focusing just on paid ads, you pay forever. You stop paying, you disappear. And also, how many people click on ads? Very few. People know that if it says ad at the top on page one, you're paying to be there. If you're there in number one or number two or number three, you deserve to be there. You worked hard to get there. Your content's amazing. You should be there. So that's why it's very, I think Moz did a report earlier this year that was saying like 18% of people click on ads. And I'm sure some of those people are just people like me who click on ads of companies they don't like just to spend some of their money. So what else matters? Like obviously content matters. SEO is important. That's just, it goes without saying. You heard this all day. You've heard this in other conferences. You hear this on blogs. You know that this is important stuff for ranking. But what else matters if you want to enter a new market? If you want to take your business from Denmark and enter Mexico and become a big player in Mexico, what else do you need? You need branding. You need search queries. You need people searching your name to help drive you up the rankings. Because if people are searching for you or your company's name, that tells Google's crawlers that there's interest in what you have to offer. And that helps all of your content go up, not just a single article, but everything attached to that name. So when we entered Brazil, I had these ideas with Neil that, when he first started talking about this, he wanted me to help him get links on big sites. And, I thought that was going to be a challenge because Brazil's really traditional and they're not going to just they don't even, at this time, people didn't even really know what links were. So if you were to go to one of the big news sites in Brazil and say, hey, here's an article, can you post it and make sure that this link with this anchor text is pointing to this, they'd be like, the hell is this guy talking about? What the fuck is a link? They didn't know this stuff because it just wasn't part of the culture with these big sites. They're owned by huge media companies and it just wasn't something they talked about. So one thing that we saw that worked really well for increasing brand queries and getting you trending in Google is contributing on big sites as a guest author. And not just doing a guest post and being on your way, but coming in as an expert from abroad on a site and talking about something that other people aren't typically talking about, but as a contributing author, not a guest poster. Saying guest posting doesn't sound as good as it used to because everybody is trying to do it. But if you're a columnist on a large site, that matters. People read that. People start seeing, in Brazil, Neil Patel does not sound like a Portuguese name. He does not look like a Brazilian dude. So, when people started seeing this, happy, shiny head on all these sites, they're like, all right, this Neil Patel guy, who is he? What's the deal? And people would Google him. People would start asking about him. People would start finding information about him, both in Portuguese and English, and saying, all right, well, this dude obviously knows what he's doing. He's been around forever. People are talking about him all over the world. He contributes to big sites globally. And it just started growing from there. It's really easy. This is in Portuguese, obviously. But what I would do is I would just reach out to editors of these big sites in Portuguese without correcting it, because I wanted my Portuguese to look a little fucked up because it's a bit charming and it makes people think, all right, well, Grant Lingel, that doesn't sound Portuguese either. So they think, all right, well, this non-Brazilian is contacting me in Portuguese, pitching this big name from abroad to do a column and saying that they're going to translate all of it and just send it ready to go. Who's going to say no to that? Everyone was excited about that. I mean, some of the biggest sites in Brazil were doing this for us every single week. We would just have this content translated and just send it over. Every week, we'd have 10 new articles posted on the biggest sites in Brazil about entrepreneurship, about business, about investing, about digital marketing, about SEO, about content creation. And it just started generating this crazy amount of interest that people were just getting in touch with us. Like, who are you guys? Like, why are you everywhere? And it turned into a lot more than in the beginning. And from there, we started pitching stories. So it wasn't just, oh, we want to, post every week about SEO. We want to talk about different things. Like, this is Neil Patel, who is the internet millionaire that wants to invest in Brazil, because he's invested a lot of money in Brazil. We've built a really big team. We've got about 45 people on our team in Brazil. So, I mean, we're investing a lot. We're buying sites. We're growing sites. We're growing businesses. We have a big consulting business in Brazil now. I mean, we work with, startups with funding all the way up to banks. So, I mean, we've made it to the point in 3 years where we're kind of just everywhere now. But in the beginning, we were just generating buzz and interest and testing a lot of different ways to get his name out there, because nobody really knew who he was except for the die-hard SEO people and the marketing people like us. Like, nobody really knew, but it didn't take that long for him to become the marketing guy in Brazil. There's other popular marketing people, of course, but there was before Neil, there wasn't just like one guy or one woman that was just dominating. It was typically companies that had like the biggest marketing sites, and now it's changed. And now there's actually quite a few big names that we all know, and we speak at events with them, we hang out with them, we collaborate with them, we do interviews with them. This is another email. But I mean, like, the guy in the middle there, his name is Gustavo Caetano. He has a company called Sambatech. I mean, Business Insider called him Brazil's Mark Zuckerberg. I think that's the stupidest thing to call somebody, but it's funny. But I mean, he's like one of like the LinkedIn influencers in Brazil. He's got millions of followers. He's just a really popular entrepreneur. He speaks like 4 times a week. He's just constantly zipping around Brazil, speaking everywhere. And we've just become friends with these folks. Like, everybody loves Neil. Like, Neil, people don't really understand how Neil is in real life because they just see him online and they just assume he's just this guy that, wants to make money and build traffic and all this. But he's actually just like a really fun, nice dude. And like, he'll do an interview like in his kitchen or in his living room or wherever. Like, anybody who's contacted us from Brazil asking for an interview, he does it. Even if the blog has 500 visitors a month, it doesn't matter. Like, if you're entering a new market, you enter that market, because 500 visitors on a small little blog, they might be the most devoted visitors ever and love that little blog. Doesn't matter. You don't need to go after the biggest one. You can go after the big ones and the small ones and everyone in between. Because if you want to enter a new market, you have to do it right. You have to be everywhere. You have to be open to talking to people and learning from people and teaching people and just being a part of the community. And Neil doesn't speak Portuguese. His Portuguese is fucking terrible. Like, when he tries to speak Portuguese, like on stage, he'll ask us before, oh, how do I say this? I'll make a joke. And he'll go up and destroy the joke. Like, he'll say something so ridiculous. Everybody is just kind of like looking around like, was that supposed to be Portuguese? And then he'll be like, wait a second, wait, what was it? And he'll keep trying, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And it's just, he doesn't need to speak the language. And it's not like Sweden where everyone speaks perfect English. It's amazing. Like, no one has a headset on. Everybody understands me perfectly. If he was doing this in Brazil in English, everyone would have headsets. It's very difficult in Brazil. Only 3% of the population speaks English at a fluent level. So, you don't need to speak the language to go in and make an impact. As long as you have a team that's helping you generate content in Portuguese or in Spanish or in French or whatever the language is or whatever the market you want to enter, it's fine. You don't need to be the person. Like, if it's your brand, if you are the brand, you don't need to be fluent in the language. Nobody in Brazil is expecting Neil Patel to speak Portuguese. Like, it's It's not expected. Events. When you're entering a new market, you don't need to be as big as Neil or Rand Fishkin or any of these huge names in marketing to get on stage. Like if you're entering a new market and you represent a company from Malmo or from Denmark or from anywhere in this region, you bring something to Brazil that no Brazilian can bring onto that stage. Experience from abroad, which is valuable in Brazil or any new market. Because you can learn a lot from somebody that has a company similar to yours, but had a different experience of growing it. Like that's valuable. So I mean, you might not get paid a speaker fee like Neil gets, but I mean, very few people do. Like that's, you can get your flight paid for. You can go visit Rio or São Paulo or Florianópolis or any of these beautiful cities and get on stage with amazing entrepreneurs from Brazil, or you can do the same thing in Mexico or Colombia or wherever. And you speak, you do the press junket, you do as many interviews as possible. You tell the people organizing the event that you want to do as many interviews as possible. It doesn't matter if it's a big paper, a tiny blog, whoever. You put yourself out there. You're going to fly halfway around the world anyways. What's an extra 6 minutes to have a conversation with a lovely person who has questions about your business? And who knows your business better than you? You might as well talk about it. I mean, if you're looking to enter a new market, if you're looking to build into a global brand, you got to put yourself out there. I mean, the world is there. It's ready for competition. It's ready for new businesses. You can go and do it. Yeah, like I say, you don't need to be Gary Vaynerchuk to speak on a stage. Look, I'm here. You guys have no idea who I am. I just happen to work with him, but I'm nobody. So, I mean, it's very possible to bring your knowledge and your experience and share that with people who would love to hear it. And then you can do crazy things to get your name out there. This is something that we did in English and we did it in Portuguese. These are just shots from Brazil. It says, "Who is Neil Patel?" And it actually was kind of controversial because most of the people who ended up getting the most shares were like Instagram models, like wearing not a lot of clothes, like this girl down here. But I mean, we had people from we had guys and girls and all these people hold up signs saying, "Who is Neil Patel?" Because Neil's site is neilpatel.com. His about page is "Who is Neil Patel?" His brand is Neil Patel. So all these people would see these people holding up signs and say, "All right, I'm curious. Who the fuck is Neil Patel? Why is he all over my Instagram page?" So they go to Google. Who is Neil Patel? Neil Patel. Neil Patel together. And all of these search queries would just explode his name in Google Trends. And that alone would push up all of the content attached to his site in the rankings. So, I mean, this blonde girl at the top left, she's a movie star. She does like the novellas, how do you say, soap operas in Brazil. It has, 240,000 likes, just this one post. I mean, it wasn't cheap to pay her to do that, but because of her doing that, this kid did it with crayons. Like, we don't know who that kid is. Like, I don't know how many likes that got, probably like 6. But it doesn't matter. Those 6 likes are probably like his little friends, like, I don't know, Neil Patel. But it doesn't matter. Like this dude down here, we don't know who he is. We don't know who that other girl is. Like, we knew this popular movie star. And we contacted her and she did it. But because of that, over 3,400 people tagged "Who is Neil Patel?" So 3,400 posts in Brazil had people holding up phones that said "Who is Neil Patel?" or had a picture of their lunch and it just said "Who is Neil Patel?" as one of the tags because they had no idea what it meant and they just wanted to get likes. But for us, it was great. Like, we were just like, wow, like this, she's like 17, this girl. She's just like a popular TV star. And all of a sudden, people are tagging their dinners with Neil's face. It's like, this is so bizarre. But it worked really well. Like, look at that spike in Google Trends. That was Google Trends in Brazil. We went all the way up because of that ridiculous campaign of people tagging Neil's face all over their selfies. I mean, it was ridiculous. But I mean, obviously it dropped off. That's not going to keep going forever. We're not going to pay that girl or other movie stars every day to do that. But the results continue. I mean, if you get some growth, if your rankings go up a little bit because of some trending, that's fantastic. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can experiment and have fun with generating brand queries. So, I mean, if you're going to do it, if you're going to expand into Mexico or if you're going to expand into France, you don't need to create a whole new site. Like, I recommend not doing that because that's just a huge amount of work. What you can do is there's a plugin called the Polylang Pro. And it's not something, it doesn't translate anything. It just gives you the capability of adding a different language to your backend. So that can be in the form of a subfolder or a subdomain. We use subfolders, so .com/br. Neil always says if he can go back in time, he'd do subdomains, but he's never given me a good reason to why. I think the subfolder worked well because we rank for almost every single keyword that we're going after in Brazil. And if you're in WordPress, if you're looking at your pages or if you're looking at your posts, like right next to the title, you can just add flags. And there's a little plus sign. You just click on it and you add a Portuguese version or a Spanish version or a French version or a Mandarin version or whatever of that post. But this is important. To get that Mandarin version or that Portuguese version, you absolutely 100% need a real person doing the translations. Like, you can't Google Translate. You can't use any kind of tool that'll do it. Even if there's some new product out there that uses machine learning and artificial intelligence and all of this fancy stuff to make a translation, it's not ready yet to do it the right way. Like, it might be getting close, but there's going to be mistakes. And once there's mistakes, like, that's bad for branding. It's bad for your name. It's bad for the user experience, which is bad for SEO because Google wants your user experience to be amazing. Like, that's all they care about is the end user. Google wants to provide the best content for you searching, and they're not going to provide the best search for you or the best results if it's a robot translating your content. So you want to build a small local team, and really important, you want to focus on keyword analysis. You want to understand what the competition is doing. You can't, like I said earlier, you can't just go in and translate all of your content. Like, we're working on a project right now. We're expanding ActiveCampaign. I'm sure some of you are familiar with ActiveCampaign, email marketing automation solution. We're expanding them into Brazil. We're not translating everything that they have because it doesn't make sense for Brazil. It makes sense for their site in English, but some of the stuff doesn't make sense. So we're not going to translate that. We're going to translate what makes the most sense for Brazil. Then we're going to take those translations and we're going to revise them. We're going to update them. We're going to optimize them for search in Brazil. And we're going to create brand new content, just like that article I showed you on Neil's blog that only exists in Portuguese. Because otherwise, we're just wasting time and money. If we're not creating content or translating and optimizing content that's going to bring results, what's the point? It's going to make ActiveCampaign unhappy. It's going to make us unhappy because we're spending our time on something that's not going to bring the best results. And that's silly. That's just not how anyone should do it. So if you are building a local team, like, you don't need an office. Like, I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to expanding internationally. People think, oh, I would love to expand to Mexico. Oh, it'd be so cool to have our product or our business in Mexico. But yeah, it's probably expensive to rent an office in Mexico City. You don't need to rent an office. Like, our company in Brazil, we have 40 plus people. We don't have an office anywhere. I'm the only person in my city that works for our company. Like, my 3 Brazilian business partners live in the next city to the west. It's an hour flight or a 6-hour drive through crazy mountainous roads that I just would not get on ever because it's really dangerous. But I mean, you don't need an office. I mean, it depends, obviously it depends on what kind of business you're getting into. But if you're in the digital space, if you're in the SaaS space, if you have a product that can be delivered digitally, you don't need to have an office building to start your journey into a new market. It's just not necessary. And you can start small. You can start with one person working on translation, somebody that has experience. Like, if you wouldn't believe how many people say they have experience translating, but that's because maybe they translated a menu once at a restaurant. That's not the right person. Like, when we post looking for translators, I'll get inundated with hundreds of emails from people saying, oh yeah, I'm a doctor and I would love to help. I don't need a doctor. Like, I'm sure you want to make some extra cash, but I need people with experience in translations. Like, otherwise it's not going to work. Translating seems easy if you're fluent in multiple languages. It's not. Like, I've tried it. I translated a screenplay for a movie from Portuguese to English that was being submitted to Sundance from some friends that made a movie in Brazil. I was hitting my head against the fucking wall for 2 days trying to do it. And I'm fluent in Portuguese, but there's so many weird little things that you just won't ever expect when it comes to actually translating documents and translating projects. It's a pain in the ass. So you want people who have experience doing that, who don't think it's a pain in the ass, or else they're going to become a pain in your ass, and you don't want that. You want somebody who has experience with SEO from that country that you're expanding into, because they're the ones who are going to be able to understand the competition. They're going to be the ones that can understand the keywords. They're going to be the ones that can understand where the gaps are, what kind of content would be good for you guys, where you guys could quickly rank by producing new content, focusing on those keywords. And they're going to be essentially the main person on your team that's going to help you with ranking. You're going to need somebody to do outreach. It could be one of those people, the SEO or translator. It depends how, much of a hustler they are. But just somebody to send emails, to do research and find the right sites, to do columns and to do interviews and to do stories. Like, I was doing that. I'm not a PR person, but it was very easy. It was just sending emails and having a creative pitch and testing different copy. And then you need somebody to manage it. You don't need that many people. Or you just find one person to do all of that and start slowly and just get a foot in the door. It all depends on how fast you want to do it. It depends on your goals. I'll go through this fast because I know my time's running out. Focus on one market first. Don't overextend yourself and try and enter 6 markets. So you're going to be miserable. That's not worth it. We did Portuguese first, and then we did Spanish and German at the same time. That was even a mistake, Spanish and German at the same time. We didn't have a team on the ground in either of those areas. We didn't have somebody in Colombia. It was me. I don't speak German, and my Spanish is shitty. So, it wasn't like it was in Brazil. That was like our biggest lesson that we learned. You want to make sure that your process is as efficient as possible and streamlined before you start thinking about a second market. Focus on dominating a second market first, outside of your own, and then later think about new ones. Build a local team. Plan on making so many mistakes that you're going to hate yourself, but learn from those mistakes. Don't make them twice, but know you're going to make a ton of mistakes because Brazil is different from Sweden. France is different from Norway. Like, everywhere has its nuances. Don't be greedy. One new market is way better if you're doing well. Like, I would rather crush Brazil like we're doing now than do like kind of an okay job in 5 different countries. It's better to dominate one and then take all of those lessons that you learned from that one in 5 years and then go to the second market. Focus on one place first. Be patient. SEO is kind of universal. Google is universal, except maybe in China where there's a few restrictions. But be patient. It takes time. And treat each market like it's a whole new business. Even though it's the same business, treat it like it's a different one. If you have any questions, have a beer with me. Send me an email, Grant and Neil Patel. I'm on Twitter, but I haven't used it in years, so don't even bother tweeting me because I won't see it. I don't have Instagram, so I won't see that. Email is the best. Thank you.